You're listening to Forging Fluidity with Savannah Wishart and Griffin Coombs, where we humbly navigate the idea of primal purpose, exploring conversations around physical, psychological, and spiritual well-being on the quest for a truly conscious and meaningful human experience. This week's episode is an introduction to nakedness as a form of healing and personal growth. Savannah sheds some light on the philosophy behind her work in nude photography, and we explore themes around body dysmorphia, social judgment, reconnecting with nature, and generally widening the lens through which we view the idea of nakedness. As always, we invite you to be part of the conversation by engaging with us directly on social media. And of course, to subscribe to the podcast and to share this or any of our other episodes with those who can benefit. Now enjoy the episode, and thank you for listening.
Good morning, good afternoon. Welcome back to a new episode of Forging Fluidity with myself and Griffin Coombs.
Hello again.
Today, we are going to talk a little bit about nakedness. So if you are familiar with my work, then you'll be familiar with my fine art nude photography and the conversation that I bring about normalizing nakedness and using nudity as a tool for self-development, healing, and growth. So today we're going to dive deep into that topic and give a little bit of an introduction on the philosophy around nakedness and removing layers from the body as a way to remove layers from your mind and emotions. And then different tools that you can use to see yourself from different angles and from a different perspective to love yourself a little bit more and create some awareness around your body image and how that also relates to mental and emotional health.
Yeah, I hadn't thought too much about nakedness in this context until I met you and we had conversations around your work in nude photography and things like that. And most people, as we were just discussing earlier, they don't usually see themselves naked very often, except maybe when they get out of the shower or they're changing clothes in a mirror very briefly. But it's not a normal thing in most, at least in most developed societies, that people are just spending time naked. Even if it's a sweltering hot day and you don't have any air conditioning, most people will just walk around the house, even if they're by themselves, with some layer of clothing, even if it's a piece of underwear or a tank top or sport shorts or whatever it is. And so it was really interesting to me to see nakedness as something that's intentional, non-sexual, perhaps sensual, meaning a kind of a way to feel back into one's self, and that can mean a million different things, but I think you understand what I'm talking about. So nakedness as something that we do with purpose in a way that's not to change our clothes, it's not in passing, it's not to be sexually intimate, it's for, like you said, self-development, connection to oneself, art in a way, and so much more than what we usually think about nakedness, the lens through which we think about nakedness. So I'm excited to explore the philosophy around nakedness a little bit more. So what I want to know is how you very first got into the idea of nakedness as a tool for self-development.
If we go back to the very beginning of the roots of my journey with nakedness, it actually started about 10 years ago. And I was at school and studying photography, and we had a nature field trip. And on the carpool up, one of the girls was doing her portfolio on nudity. And so we were doing this camping trip. It was for a nature photography class, and me and this other girl were in the car with her driving up to kind of Northern California in the redwoods. And the whole drive, she was trying to convince us to get naked for her. And I was just like, no, there's no way I'm doing this. And by the end of the drive, I think it was 4 or 5 hours, then I had agreed to take my shirt off. I was like, I can do topless. This is fine. And finally, when we were in the middle of camping, then I randomly decided that it was okay for me to get fully naked. And I think what helped is that I brought some athletic components into it, because at that point, I was 3 years into my CrossFit journey, and I was doing like handstands and fun things like that. And so I did some handstands against the redwoods, and the photos were beautiful. And it felt so intimidating to have the subject suggested to me and visualize it, having not done it before. But once you started to remove the clothing and it was this very normal thing, then it felt natural. And I think that that is probably how it transitioned from topless to fully nude, was that once one layer came off, then it just felt natural to remove the rest of the layers.
That really resonates with an experience that I had. I think it was 2014, where I was traveling with my partner at the time through the Pacific Northwest, and we landed at a place, I believe it's called Wreck Beach in Vancouver, Canada. And it's the nude beach of Vancouver. And I was really interested. I had always been comfortable ever since being a teenager. I was always comfortable with nakedness in some different contexts that were non-sexual. Not everything, but I wasn't completely closed off to the idea. My partner at the time was a little bit less comfortable with the idea, but we went out to try it. And I remember being in kind of an outskirts part of the beach, and I decided to get naked. She wouldn't get totally naked. She reluctantly took her top off, and there were only a few people around because it was the outskirts of the beach. And she eventually became less and less comfortable because it just felt out of place to her. And so that kind of fed my discomfort a little bit. But then we kept walking along the coast and we made it to the main beach part. And that part had a bunch of naked people. I mean, just so many people, and they were all completely nude. And so to speak to the idea of pulling back layers, and once it becomes normal, it only took a few minutes for us. By the way, the noise in the background is construction going on, so listeners don't mind that. The All it took was a few minutes for it to not feel like this huge social hurdle, because you start looking around at bodies of all shapes, all sizes. No one's interested in anyone else in a way that's uncomfortable or predatory or anything like that. Everybody's just choosing to be naked outdoors in the sun. And once that lens comes over your mind, instead of this kind of, ooh, nakedness is forbidden, or nakedness is strange, or we don't see this every day, as soon as that lens goes away and the naked is normal lens comes on, all discomfort just melted away from both of us. And we could have spent the whole day at the beach if we wanted to.
I think that's such a good story to emphasize the power of putting ourselves in different environments in which we break down the walls of stigma and judgment and stereotypes that are built into us with social conditioning and societal expectations, to create a bubble where there is a different version of reality that we experience. Because so often, well, in any social setting in the Western environment, we come in fully clothed, and it's not normal for us to be grocery shopping without a shirt on or without pants on. But then as you went into this environment of a nude beach, that's kind of the expectation. And of course, my experience with nude beaches actually is hardly any at all, but I understand it as like, you, while that is the foundation of the experience for the group of people, you can do whatever you're comfortable with. And so it's not like you have to come in and be fully naked and expose yourself, but that is the foundation that is laid. And then there's an invitation there to come into that. And what you said about everyone kind of doing their own thing and it not being a predatory environment or that you're being judged. I think that's so important to note in any context because we can so easily get on our heads, even going to a gym environment and think, oh, everyone's looking at me. And we feel so self conscious about how we look or how we're performing or how our movements are being done. But then if you go to the gym and you kind of like look around, you will see that nobody is looking at you, especially if there's
No one
mirrors.
cares.
Everyone is so focused on themselves and how they look, and it's very like egocentric. So it's more important often how like their biceps are looking than how you're performing your sit-ups. So we think so much about like, oh, everyone's going to see me, but no one's really paying attention.
That's so, I'm so glad you said that because you use the word egocentric because the developmental psychology term, there's the construction again. The developmental psychology term, I believe, if we have any psychologists in our listeners, you can confirm or deny, adolescent egocentrism. And so one of the things, say you're 5 years old and you're incapable of abstract thought. And so you're in this developmental stage where everything revolves around you and everything that happens in your life, it's like you can't understand the other factors that have nothing to do with you that play into what's happening to you. And then, so that's kind of pure egocentrism. And then when you get to 12, 13 years old and you're starting to be able to think abstractly, that egocentrism goes away, but adolescent egocentrism is the same type of thing, but it's through a social lens. So it's not through a concrete physical lens like a 5 year old, but it's anything that has to do with social stuff. That's what we're self-conscious about, and that's what we're egocentric about. We believe, like, you're 13 years old and you have a pimple on your face and you think everybody's looking at your pimple, and probably most people aren't looking at your pimple, but it's all you can think about, and so you're kind of projecting that into other people. I think that follows us into adulthood, and the gym is a great example of that. And so then if you want to take an extremely intense version of that feeling, it would be being naked on a beach with a group of strangers. But like we were saying, it dissipates quickly when it becomes normal, or when you realize it becomes normal. But can I ask you how that experience at camp with this girl who was doing her nudity project, how did that change or morph into you doing your morning coffee work and you're spending time with yourself in front of a mirror naked to use it for your own individual self-development?
I actually always forget that this was the beginning of my relationship with nudity. I always think back to somewhere around 2015 or 2016 as my entry into the world of nakedness because I don't know if it didn't feel like such a big deal once I did it, and it kinda just left my conscious mind, or if maybe it wasn't as comfortable as I thought and a piece of me has repressed it, or my memory is just really bad. But I always forget to go back to this very beginning of it, and so I don't know if it really consciously had an effect on me moving forward, but it feels like it planted a seed, and then I carried that seed with me over the years. And then when it became time to water the seed, then it was already there. And what I referenced in 2015 or 16 was starting to take some nude yoga photos just for fun for some yoga challenges that I was doing. And I didn't think anything of it but I was a little bit bored of consumerism and commercialization with selling yoga pants and that industry. And so, what would happen if you removed the layers from that? And it became a more authentic expression of the body and weaving that together with the mind. So then that was very brief. It wasn't a significant thing for me. And then in 2017, then I began this deeper process with myself, with which, as you referenced, is the mirror work, sitting with myself, removing the layers. And I began to sit with myself naked in front of a mirror, have my morning coffee. So on my Instagram, I would talk about my morning coffee reflections. And I could spend 1 to 2 hours just sitting with myself and looking at my body and spending time with myself. And I remember that the reason that we first connected on Instagram was that I had shared something about being a morning person because I never counted myself as a morning person, especially in teenage years and just sleeping so much and so late. And I realized that maybe in maybe in going into these sessions with myself in the mirror, that maybe I was the ultimate morning person because I really wanted to spend that first couple hours of the day with myself. And rather than going into social settings and pushing myself into a fast-paced day, then that morning to me was sacred time. And what better way to spend it than with yourself? If you're building the relationship with yourself, that's the most important relationship that we have. So maybe then I would be the morning person because I'm not distracting myself with work or people or obligations, but I'm going deeply into myself. And I remember that that was the first thing that made us connect on Instagram.
I do remember that, and I was having my own reflections and experiments around morning routines myself, and kind of re-identifying or identifying for the first time as a morning person. So yeah, that post made it ripe for conversation. My morning routine had nothing to do around nudity. I don't think we had talked about nudity, and your work and your journey around that for a long time after that. But it's come to the point where I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you've really built in your naked alone time in some capacity, whether or not it's at exactly the same time or in front of the same mirror with the same journal each time, but you've built that in as an integral part of your life. Is that true?
That is true. I would love to every day be with my same mirror and same routine, but it doesn't always happen. And especially traveling and moving around so much, then it's not always there, the consistency. But I do try to have a lens to reflect back my physicality in some way. And if I don't have a mirror, so if we go kind of more in depth to the mirror, I think mirror work is very powerful as a tool to reflect your physical reality back to yourself. And there are ways that you can use it that really feed the ego, but there's also ways that you can use it just to accept yourself. And for me, I have a little bit of dysmorphia. And so I forget what I look like. And the mirror or photos or videos, then they really help me to see, especially if I haven't seen myself for a very long time. I can look in the mirror and be like, oh, that's what I look like. Because it's not easy for me to see the results of my training unless I have literally another lens to see it through. And so over time, the mirror transitioned to photos, and that transitioned now to what a lot of my work is, which is fine art nude landscapes. So I'll go and I'll find beautiful nature settings to take pictures in, whether it's rocks or forests or trees or mountains, canyons, sometimes water, sometimes ice. And then I'll find a beautiful composition. And then I just go set up the tripod, get my timer or my remote ready, and then I'll go and weave my body amongst the rocks or the trees, whatever way fits the landscape. And then with that, it's a way to go deeper into a meditation with solitude and an intimate experience with nature itself. So then it brings different elements together. It's a way to be playful with the body and just to really sink into yourself and allow movement to be organic. So, we've talked a little bit before about the masculine and the feminine, and then that plays into also the experience of the nature. So, I can translate how I feel into how I express my body. So, if I am feeling a bit vulnerable and small, then I might find a part of the landscape where it's kind of like a cocoon or a nest, and then I can curl myself into a ball, and that can look very nice surrounded by ferns or surrounded by like a curved rock. If I'm feeling very strong, then I might go for like, I think what's iconic with my work is handstands. So I might go into some handstand work if I'm feeling like expressive and dominating and I want to take up space and feel powerful. Um, so it's about really expanding and contracting the body and how that is translating emotions and finding freedom in the movement and in the nature. And then looking back at the camera to see, so this is what I look like. And then it becomes a tool for mental health and emotional health as well.
I'm not sure, and I've never done a nude photo shoot. I've never gone out and done what you're describing. It sounds absolutely magical. But I'm imagining, I can't say from experience, I'm imagining that being naked inspires, whether it's conscious or not, inspires the way that you will interact with nature. Meaning that's our natural state, is to be naked. So you're out somewhere, you have every inch of your body is exposed to the elements as you are meant to be primally. And so to not have a single piece of fabric draping over anywhere in your body, I wonder if that just sends a signal through your nervous system at some level in some way to kind of that helps you reconnect with your primal side, your physical side, that kind of informs the shapes that you make or the way that you interact with nature or the way that you move. I don't know, but I'm just speculating. I'm imagining it must have something to do with it.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because that's something that I've thought a lot about with in the relationship we have with nature is so often we have a layer of something man-made that is between us and the natural world. So we either have shoes on, we have socks on, maybe even if we're out in nature at a beautiful retreat, we're on a wooden platform that is man-made, even if it's coming from the trees, but we're not necessarily having our skin against a rock or our hands around a tree and really getting that sensation of the bark beneath our fingertips or the uneven surface of the rocks. And I think too, if you wanted to go into like the science of barefoot running or something like that, or foot health, then we keep them in cocoons and it warps our feet shape and we lose that connection with the earth in a way that we are able to move naturally because the world is not flat and smooth and concrete. That's not where we've come from. And so then we are able to have a more organic relationship. And you can also look into earthing, which is just simply walking barefoot through the nature. But regardless of nakedness or not, with the whole body involved, do you have any experience yourself with earthing and having that tactile sensation between your feet and the ground, and just creating a relationship in that sense with mother nature.
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned both barefoot mechanics and earthing because they're separate but they're related. I've been a barefoot person. Like all the shoes I own are barefoot or minimalist shoes, and I don't even. It's not just for training. At this point, I'm either barefoot or in minimalist shoes. I don't own a pair of non-barefoot shoes, but that's separate from earthing because it's not just about the mechanics. It's about the actual skin contact with nature, with the ground, with the earth. So it could be sand, it could be dirt, grass, whatever it is. There's a lot of I don't know if it's science, I don't know if it's pseudoscience, I don't know, I haven't looked into the details of the magnetic charge and earthing helping us. There are claims that earthing helps us negate the electric charge that we accumulate in a world of internet and cell phones and electronics everywhere we go. Regardless of that, anecdotally, I can say that it just feels great and it feels like a mode of reconnection just from the skin being on the earth. And I think that the nakedness is probably a next level of that, like being outdoors, having sun everywhere in your body, having, like you said, feeling your skin against a rock, your arms around a tree, not feeling like it's almost, not to get too spiritual because I know we're going to wrap this up soon, but it's almost like that separation of the self from the rest of the universe can be symbolized in clothing, where it's like you have a layer on that makes you, that encapsulates you as a separate being, and the feeling of having absolutely nothing on and there being no barrier between the sunlight and any part of your body or the wind and any part of your body is just something different than what we're used to.
That's so true. I love the visualization of the clothing as kind of like a cocoon. And in a way, like I've never really given into this way of thinking, but just with humans thinking that they're above the natural animal kingdom. And so maybe that really is what clothing can be also, is like it's this mask almost to put you above nature.
Yeah. And we know that's not true, and but we act that way, we all act that way sometimes unconsciously. So it sounds like the more direct experiences we can have to remind us that we are part of the natural world and not separate from it, and certainly not above it, is probably better. Before we want to keep these episodes a little around 30 minutes for our listeners, just so they're digestible. But I wanted to ask you, because you've done so much work with all of the embodiment of nakedness and using it as a tool for yourself. I'm just wondering if, well, first, let me just say that I think a big takeaway from this for me and hopefully for our listeners is that nakedness can be more and is probably good if it's more for you than just either stepping out of the shower or changing clothes or in an intimate sexual context. That there's more to nakedness that it can serve you with, and there's more ways we can think about nakedness. So it doesn't just have to be something that is faux pas because it's private and only reserved for sexual intimacy or a shower. So kind of keeping that fundamental principle in mind, what tip would you give somebody who wants to kind of start being with themselves naked a little bit more, or just tools, or just, a quick word of advice to get them started exploring this journey?
One thing that I really like to prescribe my clients is to try to integrate nakedness into their morning routine. So, to slow the morning down, to really sink into your body and yourself, and to sit with yourself in front of a mirror. So, mirror work is difficult. it's very normal for me, but that is one thing that I really want to highlight is that to me, I think it sounds easy, and it may sound easy with the ease that we're talking about it between each other. But it can be very confronting to come face to face with yourself for more than a split second of putting makeup on or getting dressed and running out the door. And so, before you put any layers over yourself, I would invite you just to sit with yourself. And you don't have to look yourself in the eyes because that can also be very intimidating, but just to look at your body and to be aware of any uncomfortable feelings that might come up. Because if we're not used to seeing ourselves naked, then we can have a lot of those uncomfortable feelings. So just to see it, and if there's something you don't like about your body, try to accept it and let it go. And over time, you can build up the time that you spend with yourself. And so there might be this period where you really maybe don't like what you see, or you've have an uncomfortable realization of, oh no, I have this wrinkle here or this imperfection here. But then as time goes on, then you can kind of build in that self acceptance and see, this is where I'm at and that's okay. And then eventually the goal would be that that turns into love. So you might go from discomfort and some fighting of your current reality to acceptance to self love. So just to be patient with the process, and you can always reach out if that is something that you need someone to help guide you with and go deeper.
Very empathetically put. And so I think that's all the time we have for this episode, but we will circle back to this topic sometime in the future, get a little bit deeper into some more of the emotional, psychological implications around nakedness practice, if you want to call it that, and just what nakedness means in society to most people. For now, if you're interested in Savannah's work, with the nude photography and just philosophizing around the practice of embodying nakedness. You can find her on Instagram at primal revolutions with an S. You can find me at moves_with_coombs.
And as usual, we will have some references for you in the show notes, and I will include a little bit of a written instruction on how you can go deeper into your own naked practice. So have a wonderful day and enjoy getting naked with yourself wherever you are in the world, and we will see you next episode.